Chapter 2. Meditating. It seems somewhat foolish that in the billions of years of existence of the universe, the presence of the human being on the surface of this modest planet should be limited, according to anthropology, to little more than 2 million years. Its origin is estimated to have begun between 20,000 and 8,000 years ago, and its civilization only a little more than 5,000 years ago. During that period, the need to survive had always been the purpose of human activities, struggling against the environment, succeeding through creativity, imposing itself with violence, or destroying whatever would interfere with its objectives. The human being conquered its place forever. However, the taste for fighting seems to be as strong as ever, and it is not a healthy fight, just the opposite. It is a fight as violent as the ones at the beginning of time when winning was a matter of life or death. The weapons are now sophisticated, the scene changed, clothing different. The only thing not altered at all is that curious specimen called Homo sapiens. During those long 2 million years until this moment, the compulsion to survive has been as strong and real as ever. Of course, if it had not, we would hardly be here now. But perhaps this will to survive is even wilder and more violent today than in our past, due to the constant pressure exerted by social conflicts and by the insecurities inflicted by the system. The old spiritual hopes that lessen man's suffering disappeared before the technological development and the growth of a materialistic society, forcing him to quickly reformulate the reasons for his beliefs in order to justify his ordeal, a sad substitute to mitigate his sufferings and guarantee his survival. This situation places man in a hideous, gloomy reality. He becomes more and more distressed and pessimistic in a world where physical space and housing are endangered. 1550 new human beings are born every minute. A world where the sources of food disappear and where soil is impoverished by the destruction of 20 billion tons of its topsoil every year, creating 6 million hectares of new deserts. And to make things worse, our water is contaminated, and we do nothing about it. It may seem ridiculous, but in older times, an individual's need for water averaged less than 5 liters per day. Obviously, man's hygiene was precarious at that time. Nowadays, for only personal and household hygiene, each inhabitant needs 10 times more than that amount daily. And although this still seems slight, there are some urban centers where the absurd quantity of 500 liters of water is used per person daily. The estimated quantity of potable water on the planet is around 7 or 8 million cubic kilometers, replaced only by rain. However, increasing pollution gradually diminishes the quality of pluvial water. It may seem that there is no reason to worry, but if we think of a great city with approximately 14 million inhabitants, such as Sao Paulo, with its factories, parks, and gardens, the situation is quite different. 13 to 14 million liters of organic liquids are expelled by 14 million bladders and are sent straight to the sea, along with the 7 million kilos of excrement that will also reach the sea every day. And on top of all that, we will have about 7 million liters of other dirty water that will drag all the foregoing to the sea or to a river. And it will happen every day, continuously, year after year. Think of how much has already been thrown into the rivers and seas all over the world up until today. A dramatic investigation carried out in the Mediterranean by the famous French oceanographer Jacques-Yves Cousteau confirmed that its waters were deadly contaminated. And even if its continuous pollution were stopped, it would require 2 centuries before the water would be clean again. Deforestation grows at the frightening rate of 11 million hectares of tropical forest annually, a result of a constantly active and predatory economy, despite the concern of ecologists. These pessimistic numbers, given by the United Nations Population Funds, indicate that something must be done immediately. 150 children are born every minute, giving us the absurd number of 220,000 new people per day. At this rate of growth, in the next 13 years, the Earth's population will have at least 1 billion more people, a figure which in 1850 represented the total population of the planet. This means that it will take humanity only 13 years to produce the same population that it previously took 80,000 years to produce. What can we expect for the next 13 years then? What will happen to the world? This accelerated Disorderly growth that will give the planet a population of 6 million inhabitants in the year 2000 will basically occur in the poorest regions of the world, Latin America, Southern Asia, and Africa. In that year, 11 of the 13 biggest cities on Earth will be in the third world. And according to the UN, Brazil will hold the sad record of having 2 of those concentrations of misery. One of them will be Sao Paulo with 24 million inhabitants, second only to Mexico City with 25.8 million. The other will be marvelous Rio de Janeiro, which will not be so marvelous with its 13.3 million inhabitants, classified as the 10th largest city in the world. At present, according to numbers given by the UN, 49% of the Brazilian population live below the poverty line, 39% below the misery line, 20% are illiterate, 9% hold 40% of the total income of the country, and misery grows at the rate of 4% a year. There is also the growing lack of job opportunities, which we must agree is becoming more and more problematic. The prospects for education are also very poor. Due to the social and economic situation, it is more difficult each year to find vacancies in state schools or colleges, and the private schools are too expensive. We can't expect human beings to be indifferent to this situation. It would certainly be normal to react in the direction of a reformulation, unless there was a hidden motivation that forces such confusion. I wonder if man is a normal product in the universal process. I wonder if Adam's sin was not to have been an unnatural device created outside of cosmic laws. The answer is in the discovery of our identity. What a frightful world, and what a hopeless future for a creature that seemed to be God's work, destined to be able to build his own happiness. In theory, we should be able to evolve and find the right road to accomplishment. That road would be coherent, rational, and obvious. But it seems that man is far from doing the right thing, and far from wanting to be rescued from himself. Instead of looking for solutions, he tries to excuse his heedlessness and turn it into something good. How complicated and difficult to see the obvious. How stubborn and intransigent to let others guide him. How many unsuccessful experiments and how many attempts frustrated by fear. Until when will the human being pity himself? When I look back, searching my mind for memories, it seems unbelievable that almost 2 decades have passed since everything began and transformed me. With my mind's eye, I see the faces of so many people I have met. Good, difficult, skeptical, serious, joy, funny, stubborn, suspicious ones, all of whom I learned to love. And I think of the many others I will still meet. Many times as I've wandered along the streets, I found myself watching people walking to and fro and wondered what drives them on, how much their lives are worth, their past and their future. I've tried to read in their faces what inner power runs in them and what destiny has brought them to my world. And I see clearly that time is an implacable common enemy in man's life. Life passes terribly quickly. One day when we wake up, we will sadly see that youth has gone, that there are no more opportunities, and that mistakes made in the past will linger as an indelible stain. We do not have the power to go back to the moment of our failures and alter situations we would now know how to cope with. There is no forgiveness for the wrong choices we made, nor mercy for what was lost. The only thing we can do is to regret the opportunities we missed, the wonderful people we didn't understand, the ones who forgot us, left, and never came back, the initiative we never took, and the courage that we lacked. But to what extent are we really responsible or to blame for the misfortunes of life? After all, nobody has taught us what living is. Nobody has shown us clearly the road to take in this labyrinth of ideas, nor the objectives of life. What direction should we take? What should we do to avoid suffering? Why should we live? Where are we going? What is our destiny? Should resignation and acquiescence be our fate? Should spirituality be our motivation? Being born into this small world is an incredible but horrible adventure, for our masters are as naive, primitive, and ignorant as ourselves, because they also are learning how to live in the continuity and the inactivity of their own moments. The various experiences of their lives can impart only a pale idea, a feeble indication of what we can expect. Opportunities will present themselves in a different way for each person. Anyway, 2 people going through the same situation at the same time will have different reactions. Each human being was modeled and developed within his own environment. from his conception up to his immersion in the various circumstances and events of his life. Thus, he acquires data and elements for the structural building of his own private language, which from then on decodes, interprets, and evaluates every new experience. Life will have as many facets and ways as people in the world. The worst of it is that nobody asked us at any time if we wanted to come to this world and face it. However, no matter what cosmic reason determined this condition, here we are, and we have to cope with it. Unfortunately, reality is what I have described. Pleasure and pain, good luck and bad luck, life and death are part of a continuous process on the universal stage, like roulette or a lottery. Paradoxically, we are born to die in this material universe. Life in itself seems to exist as a foolish agony, where the end will inexorably come, because this is the only certainty we have. And when it comes, when that inevitable end reaches us, will we be prepared to finish that vital cycle which is part of a material reality, or has this life been lived in vain? Cruelly and insensibly, life usually punishes or rewards us according to a strange, complicated logic. The same as when you enter a game without knowing all the rules and find yourself in a difficult, complicated situation. Only after having won or lost few games by pure chance, and after having suffered substantially, will we be capable of besting our circumstances, or of at least achieving a better score. In the final tally of life, who could honestly say if he won or lost? Who could say if he won the puzzling, mysterious, fantastic game of life? What kind of success characterizes the winner? What proves that the game was actually won? And most complicated of all, what is the game of life really? It seems that these questions are quite difficult to answer. When asked, each person will give a different answer, since success has a particular connotation for every human being. No wonder it causes confusion and misunderstanding. The great majority of people associate the idea of success with the acquisition of material goods and wealth, together with an outstanding social position that will give them prestige. A minority is also tied to the principle of security and comfort, but not so obsessively. At some time in our lives, we all dream of realizing our ideals, to have a beautiful house, a good current model car, financial stability, to travel, not be job dependent, to have our ideal mate to make us happy, and if everything turns out well, perhaps to have a family. Well, I believe the great majority will agree with me. Some may add a few details, but that is the overall picture. After all, our ideal of a good life is to have power and riches, and to take advantage of everything and everybody. That is the product of a megastructure that feeds the illusion of needing to attain all this, and so increases the number of its participants. It is as if people were programmed generation after generation to make the same choices, to retain the same habits, and to have the same objectives of life, with the only difference being that the details are changed to guarantee the apparent renewal of advantages. It is like buying the latest model car. What does it have that is fundamentally different from and better than last year's car? Nothing, actually, except maybe the optional items. A little more power and some aesthetic differences, but it is basically the same car. Its initial objective is still the same: transportation. A new car being a sign of status and power, the human being is urged to consume more and more, without bothering to question if what he already owns suffices. In a competitive system, being satisfied is dangerous because it could be considered ignorance, stagnation, or lack of ambition in life. In this way, the system stimulates consumption as an excuse for satisfaction. It suggests mythical limits, but also creates a feeling of insecurity about its loss. The strong fear caused by uncertainty, subliminally or directly stimulated by means of communication, by idealized archetypes of winner and loser, by myths of the outstanding millionaire and misery without future, is greatly responsible for the human attitude. Just consider our aggressive daily life to realize how the situation drives us towards contention and competition. The obsessive search for economic stability and comfort, a good salary or a fixed income, represent the universe of human ambitions and inner poverty that spoils man's integrity. If we look back on our own life, we will see the contradictions that affect the plans of men and women, no matter their social, cultural, or religious conditions, no matter their ages. Our life offers daily examples of how we are forced to behave according to the system. We are all actors in the play of life, and ones who do not act well are culled or destroyed. This statement is easily analyzed. There are lots of examples that can illustrate my words. Remember our adolescence when we were around 17 or 19 and people began to pressure us into choosing a career? There were many questions and suggestions about professions and universities. If we wore different, unfashionable clothes, if we did not smoke, drink, or participate in riots, we were youngsters of good character. But to the young in society, we simply did not know the pleasures of life and were outdated. In other words, we were odd. If we had to work to pay for our studies, we were responsible youngsters, but poor. If we did not work, we probably belonged to an excellent, wealthy family. If we were seen at a party and were poor, people would say we were irresponsible. If drunk and rowdy, but with money, it would be considered just a healthy moment of relaxation. If we went by bus, our future would be hard. If we had a car, especially a new one, our future would be promising and easy, for it showed our family could give us any help we needed. For girls, things are just the opposite. When they are around 17, questions will be about boyfriends. If they have a steady boyfriend, what university she wants to enroll in, although everybody knows she will probably never follow a career, or if she does, it will not be for a long. And around 25 years of age, questions will go straight to marriage. If she is married, they will ask about her children. If she has one child, they will ask about the second one. If she works as a secretary, she will need to learn how to avoid the boss's seduction and keep her job at the same time. If she is rich, it will be difficult to find a man who likes her for what she is. If she is an executive, it will be hard to find a man who does not fear her. If she is a little conservative, a good housewife, helpful, gifted, she will be a perfect candidate as an ideal wife and consequently the mother of children. Totally devoted to her home and with no time to develop intellectually and culturally, her universe will be reduced to the four walls that will surround her for the rest of her life. And following the rules, she will stay at home, performing the role of a good housewife, and her husband will be happy and proud of her. If she is single and over 27 with a steady job, living alone or with her family and very happy not to be engaged to any man, people will say that something is wrong. To begin with, they will say she is on the shelf. They will even suspect her sexual preferences are not normal or that she is neurotic. At work, in a profession where historically men have always been the master, it will be a challenging test from beginning to end. She will struggle all her life to prove she is as good as if not better than any man, and to at least earn their respect. But she will rarely reach the top, which will most frequently belong to a man. If she is too liberal, adjectives will be used in profusion, and men will consider her as an excellent possibility for adventure. I remember an interesting popular saying, "Good girls go to heaven, bad ones go anywhere." It shows a clear picture of what it means to be a free, independent woman with the same privileges as men. She will be considered vulgar and inadequate, and men will feel uneasy to have to compete, to be compared with her, and will feel the need to show their superiority. We could not expect less from a society where the word man is a synonym for humanity and God is considered male. We say God is our father. Nobody has ever said that God is a mother. From the beginning, the idea of woman has been associated with the treacherous, seductive, ingenuous, irresponsible, greedy image of biblical Eve. According to the Apostle St. Paul, woman was created by God with the only intention being to serve man, who was created to serve God. According to him, God considers her inferior. The biblical text says that she was made from man, consequently she depends on him. For man ought not to have his head covered, since he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of man. For man does not originate from woman, but woman from man. For indeed man was not created for the woman's sake, but woman for the man's sake. Corinthians 11, verse 7 to 9. Unfortunately, today women have also been trapped. They frantically imitate men, trying to assert their personality and delimit their own space, in a fight that is most of the time cruel, exaggerated, desperate, and that affects their physical and inner beauty, basically harming their natural femininity, sensuality, and sensibility. What should the correct behavior of both sexes be? Even in a masculine society, men are not free from their obligations to the system. If the man is young, Around 25, he must be a graduate and probably looking for a postgraduate course or trying to attain a leading position in his job. If he has the latest model of car, he will surely be one of the 30% of successful young men, but he still has to buy an apartment and make some investments. As he is considered a good match, most girls' concerned mothers will try to catch him. The others will try to catch the very few who belong to very rich families and can have everything without paying for it. He can go to more than one university and do complementary courses at the best places. As for a job, he can choose between working in the family business or opening his own. If he does not have a good job and his salary is not enough to buy a car, or if he has saved just enough to buy an old rattletrap that is constantly being repaired, if he lives with relatives or has to use most of his small salary to pay rent, if he does not have time to study because he has to work extra hours, people will say he is doomed to failure. This sounds like an absurd reflection, but it is all part of the daily reality of many men. It is even more absurd to see that in the subconscious archetypical region of people's minds, there is a belief expressed in the popular saying that there are two ways to be successful in life: either to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth, or to struggle for success and be dynamic, smart, shrewd, and cunning with no scruples. Of course, there are more ways, such as marriage for economic reasons or the lottery, but they are less likely to occur. Socially, here or anywhere in the world, every person has to perform roles determined by the local culture, like it or not, in order to be accepted into the institutional human context. That is the only way to survive. In a competitive society like ours, every human being is a competitor, an enemy that can take your place at any time. A short moment of distraction, any lack of preparation, a badly planned strategy, or a wrong word, and you will lose the opportunity for a good job, a business transaction, or even the person you love and share your life with. Male-female relations are usually difficult because the competition syndrome interferes. It is almost impossible to shake free of the archetypes, behavioral patterns, or conditioning that delimit the typical characteristics of a relationship, unless your search for a shared happiness is done outside of social and cultural conventions. Both man and woman must undergo an inner revolution to be able to love, be happy, and behave accordingly to reach a positive evolution. In order to reach the boundless joy of a healthy relationship, they must break the ideological barriers, the limitations of sex, the pettiness of tradition and establishment. A relationship must be a discovery of contents, an opportunity for development and satisfaction in a shared experience, never a hazardous one. In the arena of social life, where we are all gladiators fighting for the promise of fake freedom, there are many and various available weapons. In this scene of countless characters where the stage is dwindling, it is easy to be morally and socially destroyed in order to eliminate competition. You are usually labeled according to what you think, what you wear, how you walk, your haircut, places you regularly go to, courses you attend, whether you work and where, your habits, your manners, what you say and how you said it, and even what you eat. From these elements, people will judge whether you are responsible, interesting, nice, intelligent, ambitious, generous, with good or bad prospects for the future. In short, they will decide what role you should be given in this play of life and whether a relationship with you would be advantageous. I wonder if life is just a momentary struggle between human beings, if it is a performance with different masks to disguise our true ambitions, if it is just hiding one's real feelings in order to find a place in the world or lying to the world and to oneself, trying to minimize frustration, pressure, dissatisfaction, and insecurity. How does each person see life? How can such an intelligent being have created such a powerful, anguishing trap? Where have we failed? When a person has gone on a trip to an exotic or special place only once, he can hardly say he totally enjoyed it and that he saw everything. His impressions are relative, for if he arrived with bad weather, the landscape will have offered a completely different impression from that on a sunny day. He will never know for sure if accommodation and service were appropriate or if the tour was superficial. The results of the experience will be doubtful. I remember a similar situation that happened to me. The first time I went to Narana on the beautiful island of Fernando, off in the Atlantic, 350 kilometers from Natal, it was a fantastic experience. I totally ignored the geography of the island, its attractions, and chiefly the places I should or could visit. As an amateur diver, I was too excited to plunge into the green waters and participate in a unique underwater adventure. I had to strictly obey the directions of the guides and the established sequence of visits to beaches and other places we were taken to. Because of my curiosity and inquiries, I made friends with the guides and some islanders and got to know places that were not included in any tour. I also learned that, according to the tide, some places were inappropriate for diving or their beauty could be marred. I fell in love with that lost paradise in the ocean, visiting it 3 times. I learned the best time to visit and explore its resources to the maximum. In many cases, identifying the changes of tide that sometimes totally altered the landscape and the possibility of a successful dive. Once, talking to a group of friends in Sao Paulo, I told them about my unforgettable trips to Noronha. I was interrupted by a friend who said he had been there during his holidays and had found it all extremely boring and unpleasant. While he was there, the weather was awful, it rained all the time, it was windy, and the sea was rough. The same way that my friend was frustrated with his visit to my paradise, thousands of people are frustrated with life, which is a much more serious situation, as they are facing it for the first, only, and last time. Even if we believe in reincarnation, and if it does exist, we are only conscious of this present life. If anybody could remember any previous life in every detail, it would present a big headache to them. The conscious memory of pains, joys, options, and choices made in a previous life as a result of learning in that particular life would influence one's current options. Previous experiences would interfere in and limit one's present life, which would be meaningless and offer no opportunity for development. That is why each existence has to be unique. In fact, it is not important to know the truth about reincarnation. What is really important is to know that the life we are living now is our great opportunity to accomplish something, to learn, to evolve, and to be happy. There is no point in knowing whether there is another life after this. If there is, it will have another purpose. Besides, we may reincarnate anywhere in the cosmos, not only on Earth. If we are here now, it is because this is how it should be at this moment, and we must do our best. If my friend had visited Noronha again, at the right time and in favorable weather, he would certainly have changed his unpleasant impression and might even have fallen in love with the island as I did. But I think that thousands of people who traveled to an interesting distant place may have discovered after some time that due to bad planning, lack of better orientation, limited time, wrong information, or distraction, they did not see or enjoy an important or interesting part of the place they visited. Some of these people may be planning to go back to that place on their next holiday when they have enough money or the weather is favorable, but not everybody can do that. In the course of life, the same opportunity can hardly be repeated. If you're lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time with the correct knowledge and condition, it will probably happen only once in all your life. Life is a visit to a place called Earth, where we will not be able to go back consciously to accomplish what we did not do or forgot to do. It is a trip with a one-way ticket, including a city tour with no delays or repetition, for we will not have a second chance. The routes we take, the friendships we make, the relationship with our guides, and the attention we pay to details are the tools that will help us understand the world and what life offers for or against us. They will help determine if this paradoxical place called Earth is paradise or hell. And worst of all, the scenario we will leave for the ones that come after us depends on that venture. It may be a picture of hope or despair. On the other hand, I would like to remind you that what we have learned from life up to now is the conglomeration of the historical journey of thousands of people, all one-way journeys with no return, at least not consciously. And it is important to mention that the result of a single visit to a place is always doubtful. Although the pyramids of Egypt have been there for more than 4,000 years, continuous findings reveal that history is not always as we believed it was. So the more we learn about a place, the more our perception about it changes. Historically, the only knowledge or direction relating to life and its mysteries were in the religious, philosophical, or esoteric texts. In the first case, the principles clearly showed a policy of humility, subordination, and absolute resignation. Any suffering, misery, sacrifice, or happiness was sent by God's will. Everything that occurred was part of God's wish. However, I think that if God had to spend all eternity testing people, listening to their complaints, granting requests, and helping those in need, we would have to admit his total failure as the artisan of such an imperfect being, unable to stand on its own. According to this point of view, man would be so fragile and irresponsible that he would permanently need God's protection and the constant threat of punishment in order to be good. If the Almighty God is omnipresent, omniscient, knows past and future, he undoubtedly knows how and when we will sin or do evil, steal, kill, etc. So why would he create us if he knew in advance that we would be so immature, irresponsible, and violent? It seems a little odd to me that God would deliberately create a being inclined to sin. And what is more, that he knew when, how, and how many times that would happen, and the ultimate fate of humanity. In his almighty power, God must know what and when our final destiny will be, and if in this process he has to intercede or help somebody, it means that his own creation is unprepared for life. It means that at the moment of creation, he did not foresee the possible reactions, problems, or demands that the human being would have to face, and that he would depend on him for the rest of his life. Extrapolating, I could even think that the human being was created imperfect to depend on God on purpose. In that case, it would be a manipulated, submissive creature, unable to act for itself and with no free will. Anyway, if man was created to choose and act freely, he would also have to accept the unpleasant consequences of his choices, for making mistakes is part of choosing. If God interferes in man's path, he will never allow him to act for himself. Man will always be dependent, and God will be totally responsible for man's failure in coping with life. God would be an autocratic entity, though protective and paternal, leading man to accommodation and proving his total irresponsibility and lack of ability to be God. Following this reasoning, as if we were created by a limited, insecure God, we will have many imperfections and will never be able to have a free, full life. We will never know whether we are thinking of our own free will or through God's. We will never know whether the feeling of guilt is intended to guarantee our dependence. This creator God would be as unfit to be God as we to be men. If we accept the fact that free will and universal justice really exist, we will come to the conclusion that God cannot be what has been described above, that he did not create us to be puppets or robots. Why did he create us then, and what for? In order to understand that, it is fundamental to have in mind that our existence is tightly tied to the reason for creation. Let's explain that. I agree we may get a little confused with all this thinking, but we are at least beginning to realize that the reason for our life is bigger than the most absurd dream or ideal that has ever been imagined. It would be complete madness if we were still stagnant and satisfied with mysteries and dogmas in the passive attitude of submission and meekness. But humanity has just begun to break the chains of ignorance. It is amazing to think that began to consider thinking a little more freely outside religious precepts only around 1866. Up to that date, the ideas of the scientific Western world were based on only one book for the interpretation of life and the world, the Bible. So we cannot but understand why in 1543, the Polish astronomer Nicola Copernicus was so afraid when he presented his theory of the two movements of the planets, one around itself and another around the sun. He was careful enough to make it clear that it was only a coherent conclusion of his observations and not a true vision of the universe. Fortunately, he was a priest and nephew of the Bishop of Ermland, Lucas Wachenrode. As a mathematician, doctor, and lawyer, he was admired by Pope Clement II, but was in conflict with the reformer Martin Luther. The Dominican friar, Giordano Bruno, was not so lucky. Bolder than Copernicus, he was imprisoned by the Inquisition in Venice. For 6 long years, he was tortured so that he would deny his ideas and eventually burned at the stake on February 17, 1600, at the age of 52. The madness did not stop there. In 1633, Galileo Galilei himself was sentenced by the Inquisition to home confinement for the rest of his life for supporting the theory that the earth revolves around the sun. In 1655, other people were also burnt at the stake in the name of truth, people such as Isaac de la Peyrère in Paris, for stating that Adam and Eve were the original couple of only one race, probably the Jewish. And around 1512, in order to stop the massacres in America and create a basis for punishment of transgressors, Pope Julius II had to decree that the Indians of the recently discovered continent also descended from Adam, and consequently also had an immortal soul. In the field of philosophy, the concepts relating to life and the mystery of creation are much wider, deeper, and more intelligent. However, their development throughout history was not free and easy. The Greeks, from Socrates to Plato, considered that creation had always been there from the beginning, without any alteration or transformation. There were only interdependent forms, tied to one another logically. The current of thought establishing the existence of a system within nature began with Aristotle, but it did not attain the importance it deserved because the religious beliefs of that time interfered in its development. In philosophy, dialectic has sometimes been on the brink of ideological precipices that could have totally hindered the awakening of humanity without necessary care and prudence. For centuries, man has philosophically asked himself about the correct attitude towards the world and life. There have always been many answers, but all were limited and inadequate. No wonder. Although many philosophers and wise men sensed intuitively that the great majority of these problems could be solved either through a change of attitude or better inner development, the concepts of correct attitude or inner development have always been obscure, as well as the important concepts of good and evil, morality and immorality, which are in fact regional, cultural, and religious. It is useless to search for solutions to problems or conflicts that were created within a certain level of consciousness if we know that that level of consciousness is limited, chiefly if those solutions are imagined with the mentality of that same level. It is only possible to find alternative ways and practical solutions when we thoroughly understand the mechanisms that led us to the conflict. So it is necessary to make an evaluation, a careful, in-depth examination focused on an objective of general interest that will not distort the process, but to the contrary, will complete, justify, stimulate, and make it more understandable. On the other hand, mechanisms used to find solutions, like philosophy in this case, are going too far, getting lost in incredible reveries of a sacred mission, which instead of offering a practical approach with feasible alternatives, look for extrapolation of ideas, falling to unreal exaggerated dreams, where ideas are mixed with exaltation of the ego, proselytizing, false intellectual self-affirmation, and alienation. These attitudes surreptitiously lead to the maintenance and reinforcement of the pattern of behavior required by the system. Under the close watch of the magicians of words and masters of manipulation of inner necessities, dialectic and demagogy have found fertile ground in which to develop silly assumptions whose basis will always be tied to religious, cultural, and ideological conditioning that a minority insists on maintaining, obviously to preserve its power. In the esoteric or occult fields, there is no difference. There we find a mix of alternative religion and philosophy, frequently showy to serve the interests of the few and subdue the many. Karma or causality is the excuse and the justification for everything. If anything disagreeable happens, put the blame on karma. In an unusual but pertinent way, submission and resignation to life, suffering, and privation have found an easy explanation, stimulating passivity and eliminating guilt. You must suffer to pay your karma. You have incarnated in an atonement planet in order to expiate your debts. It was destiny, for it was written in the stars, or it was the casual result of unchained energies. In mysticism, there is a need to abandon reasoning, a kind of obsessive escape from the feeling of guilt belonging to every Occidental religion and philosophy, which requires constant attention in order not to fall into temptation. Fear of God, of sin, of punishment creates a repressed, prudent but false behavior. The feeling of being watched and continually censured enslaved human behavior. In Eastern religions, there is no guilt. Everything is the result of external agents and forces at work. It is the theory of liberation. There are no gods that work out punishment. There is no punishment in an eternal hell. There is only a transition to another situation of life. There is nothing to fear. There is nothing to be blamed for. Behavior must be free and without prejudice. Love is the word of command, and its practice an obsession. This is why there is a nearly massive migration towards Oriental religions and philosophy. Instead of controlled thinking, rules, guilt, formal repression, and hypocritical morality, they offer freedom of feeling and intuition, with no barriers to dreams nor limits to fancies, because there is no obscenity or guilt, only words of love, comprehension, and unconditional forgiveness. In this magical world, repressed feelings are revealed, secrets and guilt are expressed through symbolism, and a total lack of affection, which is the consequence of an authoritarian, conformist, and punishing system, finds compensation in ecstasy. All that, the mere reflex of a queer life created in a cold, calculating society, now finds meaning in the rescue of emotions and feelings, probably lost or forgotten in the entanglements of the struggle for life. The search for spirituality through the elation of emotions shows the terrible lack of affection and solitude caused by the system and institutions. The human beings that are still sensitive totally refute the authoritarian, rational world that governs them and try to find in mysticism and spirituality the love, understanding, beauty, safety, attention, assurance, freedom, faith, and hope that they need. Through that magical journey called mysticism or spirituality, imagination grows wings and finds the means to escape this troubled world, seeking an explanation beyond comprehension, a life far removed from daily pettiness. In short, an ideal place, an oasis, far from reality where their fondest dreams can come true. In that place, anything can happen. I sometimes have the impression that man enjoys picturing himself as a poor creature in the middle of a hurricane of gods, energies, stars, and destinies that determine the course of life, and that, like it or not, he will have to submit and passively in order to survive. Man is completely ignorant as to the process of human development to high levels of consciousness. He knows very little about the aspects and interaction of its mechanisms. Escaping all responsibility, we create myths, religions, and beliefs to justify suffering. We created mythologies to explain joy and pain, and according to our wishes, we shaped invisible beings that we say are responsible for the destiny, pleasures, and misfortunes of our life. That way, we take the responsibility off the only responsible ones, ourselves. Since our ancestral origins, we have projected in time the primitive behavior that characterizes all creatures, the survival of the strongest. Unfortunately, we have kept this going for centuries as something natural and necessary for the development of our societies. In legends and myths, this attitude is apparent. One is always trying to take advantage of the others. This results in the division of human beings into two teams of gladiators, the submissive and the dominant. The human race has found in religion, philosophy, esotericism, or politics a divine or functional excuse to dominate through manipulation and to subjugate through dependence. Humanity is aware of this situation, and it is this awareness that generates conflict. However, the situation has to be accepted passively, for it is part of the projected natural reality that establishes two levels of survival, the leader and the ones led. I wonder if this vertical hierarchical relationship is really necessary for the development of any society. Following this line of thought, we can see clearly that there are not many chances for favorable changes or a promising future in life, if you can call it life. The human being constantly experiences tension, stress, apathy, neuroses, and psychoses, and cannot imagine that another kind of life may exist. The demands of participation in the system exact a very high price. Besides using up all his time, energy, and health, man is perpetually tied to an imperceptible chain. The majority cannot see this condition of slavery. Man is so used to this that being a victim is his natural condition. To make things worse, he does not see himself as a victim, but as someone realistic and completely integrated with the demands of life. The game consists of working to exhaustion, constant competition, cheating your competitor before he surpasses you, earning more and more money, buying things, being the best, the first, being outstanding, self-affirmative, being successful, and being admired by others. And incredible as it may seem, he considers it all normal. All these points will be constant objectives in his life. Although survival is painful, with struggles, segregation, violence, difficulties, egotism, and so on, he has to submit. And what he has been taught from the day he was born will follow him to his death, which I expect will be its consequences. The evidence that man does not feel he lives in slavery is, alas, as obvious as absurd. I'm reminded of the Republican period when Negro slavery was abolished. It happened simultaneously in several countries during the same period. The United States, Peru, Brazil, and others, giving the slaves freedom and the hope of a new life. However, to general surprise, the great majority of emancipated slaves wanted to return to their masters' homes. This madness was, surprisingly, logical. For generations, they were used to a structure that ordered, fed, and sheltered them. Now largely illiterate, with no professional preparation and nowhere to go, they were thrown into a hostile, unfamiliar world. They were totally unfit for freedom and their new reality. Survival was their only objective, and they paid highly for it. Hunger, misery, illness, and poor jobs were their sad daily routine. Modern man is in a similar position to the old slave. He does not know how to live in freedom, its real meaning, or what to do with it. So he prefers to continue in a system that controls his life. He denies any other way to live life and to understand the world around him. Like a slave, man spends his constrained days hiding from himself the wishes and dreams of freedom that constantly play on his mind and that secretly nurse his hope for change someday. He tries to deny his dreams, to resign himself to the established rule, for in order to survive, he is not supposed to question it. Otherwise, he will become a dangerous element that no master is willing to tolerate. So all he can do is dream and idealize worlds and beings that will someday come to rescue him. By observing all this, I came to the conclusion that something new must happen in this process that will allow the human being to understand the real reason for his existence in this particular cosmic space-time and the universally historic role he has to play. To live for 50, 60, or 80 years just to study, work, compete, suffer, raise children, and die is too insignificant an objective for such a complex creature. I had always known that the answers to all my questions were waiting for me somewhere. Looking back in time, I recall the moments when darkness veiled my perception of the world. When insecure, I looked for explanations but found only more questions and confusion. When humble in my ignorance, I submitted passively to the irresponsibility of a few scoundrels. How I had to face deception and begin everything again. But this yearning to know who I am, this inner fire to find out my true cosmic identity, kept the desperate search for answers going. And this is what I intend to share with you who are here now, participating in my memories. I will share with you all the anxieties and doubts I once had. But before setting out on this fantastic journey, many thoughts must be shared so that you can understand the objective of every answer, every word. And after this sharing, I hope our thoughts will be as one.